having said that, we'll kick it off, and a little bit about who are we. So for those of you that know the Milan Industries Group, being Milan Industries and DWM Solutions, we were founded in 2001. We're an IT partner with a people-first, business-focused approach to the way that we do business. We have our head office here in Melbourne, and then regional offices across all of regional Victoria, and a really strong and committed connection there, and also across the APAC region, with clients ranging from the top of Queensland all the way down to Hobart and across to WA. And in terms of what we do, we're a managed service provider, with our core focus being on IT support, but also from a security, a continuity perspective, and a lot in that strategy space, and helping businesses understand how to connect an IT strategy with their business growth strategies. So in 2019 and again in 2020, we were awarded the MSP 501 Awards. And what that does, it recognises the top 501 MSPs across the world, basically, and recognises that this year we're very fortunate to be in the top 100 globally and in the top 10 in the APAC region. So something that we're very proud of. In terms of what we're looking to do today, we will be running through the statistics that we're seeing from an attack perspective, from a cybersecurity perspective, cloud SaaS, and what is that, and why is it so important? What is Ransomcloud? And some really good examples of what's happening there. We'll look at the notifiable data breaches and the statistics we're seeing come through that piece, and then some best practices. And we'll give some really good examples of breaches that we've seen that have happened to some of them our clients, a lot of them not our clients, and what you can do to combat that. And then some Q&A. The whole point of today, and making today a meeting as opposed to a webinar, is that you have the opportunity to ask questions and even share experiences. And we want it to be interactive and not just one way. So the reason that we felt it was important to run this session today, we've seen a significant increase in the number of attacks through COVID. Come March, we obviously, the landscape in all of our lives changed, and having the majority of our team in the one office, we were dispersed into various offices across the state, and in some cases across the country. And from there, that opened the surface area for attacks to increase, and it's blown out. Some of the data that we had leading into this was, every 10 seconds seeing a consumer get hit by ransomware, every 40 seconds a company getting hit with ransomware. And in 2017, the estimated cost of ransomware was in the region of $5 billion. And there's one thing that's guaranteed, and that's absolutely blown out and increased. So we'll be waiting for more of that data to come through, but it's definitely increased. And what we're seeing as risks from that is a reputational piece as well. And I'm sure most people on this call would be aware of the toll breaches. And there was 2 of them that happened earlier this year, and that was significant, hit them hard, not just from a brand or the ability to deliver the services that they offer, but the brand piece was huge. And another one, the Australian government wasn't immune, or hasn't been immune from it either. They had a data breach of just over 770,000 records of Australian migrants breached earlier this year. So it's not a matter of how big or small you are. All businesses are at risk just as much. So what we've done today is we have partnered up with a key partner of ours, Datto, who have a lot of experience in that cloud SaaS platform protection and continuity piece. And we're very fortunate to have Peter Eldon, Senior Channel Development Manager across the APAC region from Datto, join us today. And Pete will be running through, he'll give us a bit of a quick update around who Datto is, but some really good insights as to what we're seeing. So thanks, Peter, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for inviting us in to join you guys. It's really nice to see some faces at the end of cameras. My role is normally to go out on the road and, we'd be out and doing this in person. But clearly 2020 had other ideas, and I've been locked in this office for what seems like eternity. So it is nice to see some faces smiling back at me. 2 pictures of me are too many, so let me get rid of that. And what I want to do is tell you just a little bit about Datto and how we partner with Milan Industries and Jordan and the team. So we're a IT specialist business out of the US. We just actually went to a public float in the US just a few weeks ago, which was very exciting. And we're in every country or every continent there's people, and we have data center presence there. And that's important because what we're asking of you guys and also Milan Industreis and the team is to trust us with your data. So we've got to be of a size and an experience to be able to be trusted with that. And one of the biggest areas where I feel we have an advantage and where we work well is we're 100% channel only. And what that means is we only work with organizations like Milan Industreis and Jordan and the team. And that's because, you know, we're very good at what we do, which is that data security, data protection, keeping ahead of the game of what's going on with bad actors and the likes. But then by partnering with local managed service providers who understand the needs and wants and challenges of businesses, you know, in Australia, around the world, means end customers get a win-win. Although, as I said, we've got over 80 staff in Australia, we still aren't as good as providing that intimate customer service as Milan Industries and the team. So that combo works really well. Now, we do a few things here. We protect your data on premise, so if you've got servers and the likes, and we also protect the data in the cloud. And when we talk about cloud, we're talking about, you know, Office 365, G Suite, these SaaS services. And if you look at our progression of a business, you know, we didn't always do the cloud services. We started off on premises. But of course, what's happened is customers have seen the benefits of moving systems off from the offices, and they're seeing the benefits of being able to work anywhere. And that's certainly paid dividends for everyone, you know, March of this year, as Jordan alluded to, when we very quickly had to move from a traditional work environment to work from home, and now this hybrid work from anywhere. And so, you know, we were ahead of the game and we were looking at that. And so as people moved to the cloud, we were providing services to protect that. But the flip side is, so are the bad guys, right? So as we're watching this and we're doing our R&D and we're making sure that we're looking for future markets, but there's a lot of people with Eastern European accents doing exactly the same thing. Because, you know, if you want to do a little bit of a deep dive on how to run a successful IT business, you kind of can't go past the malware guys, right? They're leading edge on R&D, they're leading edge on marketing, they understand what campaigns they use were successful. So it's very much an arms race, and you know, as they zig, we zag. But when we look at the benefits that businesses get from collaboration tools, we understand why people want to move there, but we've got to still make sure that you got the same protection in the cloud as you would have previously when you had a backup on site. And so that's what we do. We provide a backup service for both Office 365 and G Suite. And what we do is we actually take a copy of that entire tenancy. So if you look at your Office 365, which I'm assuming most of you guys will be on, you know, you've got your mail, you've got your OneDrive, you may have a SharePoint instance, and obviously we've got Teams and things like that as well. So what we do is we take a copy of that entire tenancy for you, and we hold that independent of Microsoft. We do that 3 times a day. So you've got every 8 hours a copy of it. Now, I'm sure a couple of you sat on here right now are going, well, hang on a second, why are you taking a copy of it? It's in the cloud, it's protected. Well, yes and no. So people are kind of generally surprised when they realize that you as the data owner need to make sure that your data is being backed up or protected by your SaaS providers. So, you know, be it, you know, 0 or 365 or whatever it is, it's important to have that conversation, you know, with your trusted advisor, or even look at the particular vendor to see who's responsible for what in relation to your data and your customers' privacy, and what would happen if you were to lose some of that. And if we look at Microsoft as a good example, they, as well as most of the SaaS vendors, work what they call a mutual obligation licensing agreement. And what that really basically breaks down is they're on the hook for certain things, and you as the data owner are on the hook for certain things. So if you look here, so what Microsoft is saying is they will always make sure that you can get access to the cloud, right? So they're going to make sure that you can always get into 365. And I mean, recently there's been a few problems with that, but on a whole, they're pretty good. And, you know, what would they need to guarantee that from? Well, they've got to make sure they've got plenty of hardware, they've got redundant hardware, it's working and it's always up. They've got to make sure they're not building their data centers in high fire or natural disaster areas. And they've got to make sure they've got plenty of redundant power and internet going in. So they'll always make sure you can get access to that cloud. But you as the data owner are responsible for protecting the data inside the cloud. And what do you need to protect that from? Well, you know, human error, fat fingers, just people deleting stuff accidentally, and then 3 months later going, oh, that tender or that spreadsheet or that PDF, which is critical for us now. Well, that's nigh on impossible to recover directly from Microsoft. That's where having that separate snapshot and backup of data would mean then Jordan and the team could very easily recover that and then provide that back to your mailbox. An area we see a fair bit of is malicious insiders. So, you know, either you exit a person from the business and prior to them leaving, they just delete their entire mailbox and a tenancy. Someone who's been more malicious about that and has actually gone in and deleting your SharePoint instance because, you know, they've got the poops on that you're walking out the door. Or an area that we've seen a fair bit of as well is people trying to perpetuate fraud on the business. You know, you hear these stories about a bookkeeper or a receptionist who was stealing money to put it into pokies. Well, you know, we've had cases where this was able to prove that case because they were going in and deleting invoices and adjusting invoices, but we had the previous copies of those, which then the police could actually use to prove a case on that. We've had a few of those go to trial. And then the biggest area, without doubt, and the most harmful area of risk to your Office 365 data is external hackers and malware. Because as I said earlier, you know, these aren't fat kids just sat in their mom's basement just playing computer games. These are highly organized criminal gangs. And in some situations, it's actually enemy state. So you've got a situation where, you know, you'll have intelligence operatives for countries who during the day are attacking government defense installations, the government themselves, contractors. And then at night, they will use that same software and moonlight to hit small and medium businesses around APAC for their own financial gain. And so, you know, they're always on the cutting edge of systems, hacks, policies, and phishing to try and, you know, make us make an error to then get that data back for their own value. And when we look at what Microsoft and the other vendors are saying about this, they're pretty clear on this and what they recommend. Now, if any of you guys are having any problems sleeping, can I recommend have a good read of the Microsoft terms and conditions? Because that will put you to sleep within about 10 seconds. Please don't do it while you're driving. But because, you know, we're good at data, we do these things for you. And this is page 8,948, I think, Jordan, of the Microsoft terms and conditions. And what they say very clearly is Microsoft have no liability for the deletion of data held within the tenancy. And they actually go on to say that, you know, their recommendation is that you keep a third party keeps a copy of your data. So in the case of an error, you can recover. G Suite says something very similar. Google won't be liable for the data. So, you know, the vendors are very much covering themselves and recommending to keep that air gap copy of the data. And because it is a problem for who's losing this, and we do see about 1 in 3 businesses are losing data in the cloud. Now, I just want to, because we're talking about bad actors, and I'm not talking about neighbors here, we're talking about, you know, viruses and the likes. I just want to talk a little bit around Ransomcloud, because this is an area that we've seen a real increase in threats coming through, but also we do a survey of businesses like Jordan and Milan and the team, and they come back and give us real stats of every year as to what's happened. And in the last 2 years, there's just been an exponential increase in attacks on Ransomcloud. And so what is Ransomcloud? It's just ransomware, but as the name sounds, it's aiming at cloud services. And we actually did an interesting exercise to see how easy it was to build these ransom clouds, because we were seeing so much of them. And so this gentleman you see on your screen here is a very famous hacker by the name of Kevin Mitnick. I'd recommend to have a Google him later on, Kevin Mitnick, because it's a heck of a story. So he hacked the NSA, he hacked NASA, he did the whole thing. They finally caught him and he went to jail for quite a long time. When he was in jail, he decided that, man, maybe I should be a white hat hacker and join the good guys. And so he did, he now goes around the world presenting in conferences and doing educational work around malware. Now, we got him to come to one of our conferences, and it was pretty scary, the stuff he was doing. Like, he was putting malware into USB, into iPhone chargers, and then would leave them on the floor in the conference, right? If someone picked it up, plugs it into a computer, then that would drop a payload onto that. These payloads were harmless, but it was just an educational piece. And if you think about it, that's really clever, right? Because who would walk by an iPhone charger, right? There's like, we've bought 57 iPhones and there's still only one charger in my house and everyone fights for them. So, you know, that's again a way they use ourselves against ourselves. So what we did on this one is we asked Kevin as an exercise is to show us how easy it would be to build a campaign that would attack Office 365. And spoiler alert, it was pretty easy. So he didn't actually even build much. So he jumped on the dark web and he actually just got a couple of ransomware as a service products and mashed that up into a campaign to go after Office 365. And he did this within 24 hours. So, you know, and what's interesting about that is, you know, we used to see an increase in DDoS attacks, so denial of service attacks, around school holidays, right? So the kids would you know, be a bit bored, they would figure out on the dark web, and then they were now they were hitting DDoS attacks on businesses who they didn't like. We're now starting to see that around malware attacks as well. So, you know, you don't need to be a coder anymore. You just need to know where to go to get these tools to about attack businesses. And so Kevin built this campaign, and the whole idea of this campaign is it looked like it was from Microsoft, and they were giving you a free anti-spam program. And so you get this email into your mailbox, and it would say, hey, there's a lot of bad actors and problems out there with viruses. So at Microsoft, we're going to give you this free anti-spam pro. Now, that's when we all should have realized this was a scam, because Microsoft never give you anything for free. So clearly delete this email, there's a problem with it. But if you look at it, it looks very genuine. And so what happens is you go, okay, well, I want my anti-spam pro, and you might, because you might be an educated and motivated IT person, but Beryl on reception or Derek in accounts, he wants his anti-spam pro and he clicks on it. And so, you know, it's quite cheeky. It says, hey, listen, there are a lot of bad people out there. We just need to confirm that you are you. So please just put in your details. And as soon as you put in your details, boom, Kevin controls you. And so Kevin's got a couple of things he can do here. So the first thing and the easiest thing he can do is he can instantly just crypto your entire tenancy. And Jordan and the team have actually got a recording of this, which they can send out to you, which is worth a look. Because when I say instantly, it's instantly. He's got two screens up. He opens up and gives that login, presses a button, boom, you see it all just got a crypto. But what he could also do with this is not crypto it straight away, and then he can actually just take over your mail and send and receive and read email on that person's behalf. And we'll talk a little bit later about phishing attacks and the likes, but that's how a lot of these happen, right? Is they get that cadence as to who's important in the business. They take over their mail, and suddenly your accounts person's getting an email saying, I'm on holiday, but I need you to move $30,000 because we're buying a business, right? And we've all seen those type of things appear. But let's look at this, right? Let's say this guy's straight just after money. So what he does, he hits a button, instantly your mail's encrypted. And what he does though is he's quite clever. He leaves the header open so you can see what important emails you've lost, but you can't get to them. And then he just says, look, oops, you've been hit, pay me a small amount. And what's happening now with Ransomcloud, they understand we're in a transactional society, right? Instant gratification. So that's what they do as well. It's only a $50 fine, as they call it. It's a $50 ransom. And within seconds, if you pay that, your data's instantly available to you again. And so, you say, well, okay, $50, it's a stupidity fine. I'll pay it and I'll move on. The problem is if you're trying to administrate hundreds of mailboxes and you're trying to manage that, then that's very problematic to your business and costly. But more importantly, that is a data breach. If you have to pay a bad guy to get access to your data, you don't know what's being left as a payload in there. You don't know what risks in there. And certainly those bad guys will be back to hit you again. And you would have to report that to the authorities, which we'll discuss in a moment. And, we can see there's plenty of examples of this. What I'd recommend to you guys is whatever industry you are in, just do a quick Google search after this. Just Google your industry, Victoria, malware, and just see the types of businesses, see if anyone you recognize. And I'm not saying to do that just for a bit of doom scrolling. The reason I recommend doing that is to get an understanding of how they're attacking your industry, what worked and what didn't work. Because I'll guarantee the bad guys are doing that. They're reviewing what's successful. They're reviewing the industries that they had a hits on. They review the industries that are more likely to pay the ransom, and they'll target them more. So, if you're an accountant, go and have a look and see how the accountants got hit and learn from that. And more importantly, talk to your staff about, well, be aware of these style of things because they're going after us. This quickly is one in Melbourne. This just popped up in my feed from this time last year. So this happened in November of last year. Absolute horror story. They had backups. They got hit by a hack. The guy came in because it was an actual human, deleted the backups that they could see, deleted their AV, encrypted over 15,000 patient files, disrupted heart operations. And to date, it's still taken 2 staff members, they reckon 2 years, to recover this data. So as Jordan said earlier, obviously a significant financial cost to that business. But, in this particular instance, the reputational loss was massive. So just on that loss and on that cost, this is an interesting stat. We survey MSPs every year, and we get info back on, as I said, the style of attacks, but also the cost of this. So I thought I'd just pop this up because we just did our survey as of yesterday, and I've got some additions to this. So in 2019, it would cost an average business 23 times more to recover from a malware than just paying the ransom. So let me break that down. So the average ransom last year around the world was $5,900. So you get hit by crypto, they send you it. We've got all your mail, we've got all your data. We're going to charge you $9,000 US, or $6,000 US. But the average cost to recover from one of those attacks, if you didn't have a business continuity solution in place, is nearly $141,000 US. And so again, a few of you guys are sitting there thinking, well, hang on a second, if it's 141 grand to recover, but only 6 grand to pay the bad guys, well, again, stupidity tax. Should I just pay those guys? Well, you can, and some people do. Some stats from last year is 20% of businesses that were hit ended up having to pay the ransom because they had no facility to get that data back. But what was interesting is 5% of those businesses didn't receive the data. So worst case scenario, they've been hit, they don't have backups, they pay the ransom, and the guys don't give them their data back, which is, is a horror. But, you know, to give them their props, you know, a majority of them did get their data back. But if you do pay the ransom, you've done three things. You've told the bad guys that you exist, because a lot of this stuff is just spam. They don't really know if they got someone until you contacted them. You've told them that your data is important to you because you're talking to them. And finally, you've told them you got money. So as I said, what they'll do is they'll put you onto a did pay list, and you will get more activity, not less, because of that. So before I bring the guys back in, I just want to touch quickly on the Data Breach Notification Act, because that's something that's, you know, it's something to be aware of, and I'm sure you guys are. So February of 2018, the Australian federal government brought in rules, which is an addition to the Privacy Act, around the loss of clients' data electronically, and then how you report that to your customers, and then also to the Privacy Commission. It also gave a set of rules and penalties if you didn't take reasonable steps to protect your data, and if you didn't then disclose that loss of data to everyone who was affected. And the challenges around malware and the likes is if you get a malware attack and you pay the ransom, you know, you can't tell who and who hasn't been affected, so you have to tell everyone. And what does that look like? Well, it might look like you putting, you know, big red letters on your website, so as soon as people get on your website, they see that. It could mean you sending, or it would definitely mean you sending notification out to all customers, and it may mean people putting up, you know, ads in papers and the likes to get that information across. But what's good about this is it gives you up-to-date information as to the types of attacks and the types of industry that they're attacking. And it's live, so every quarter they update this. I do recommend you jump on here and just have a bit of a look around and just get some stats on this. Because what you see here is very much what we see. Human error and malicious attacks, malware, make up around 96% of all downtime and data losses within Australia. When we look at the style of attacks, we see, you know, ransomware, hacking, malware are a significant area. And then that area in blue, which Jordan and the team are going to touch on in a minute, which is phishing, that is really increasing. That is growing faster than any other area, and we'll talk about why that might be the case. And again, if you look at industries, healthcare, finance, education, professional services, again, you don't need to be a rocket scientist, right? If you have a high level reliance on data, and you're going to have big reputational costs if you lose that, that's who they're going after. But if you're on this list, you're very much top of the pops. And when we look at the types of businesses that are reporting regularly to the Privacy Commission, this was the final quarter of 2019. There's some significant businesses up here. And unfortunately, if you are dealing with these and you've given information to these guys, chances are your data's been lost. Now, I'm sure a couple of you have sat there going, well, I don't really care if someone's got my password for my sausage at Bunnings, right? My loyalty card at Bunnings. And that's a fair point. It's probably not that important. But the issue here is humans we're creatures of habit. And so the password that you used on your loyalty snag at Bunnings may be and probably is very close to passwords you're using in your ERP, your Salesforce, and other areas like that. And that's what these guys do. They don't really care about Nova, but they'll use that and then they'll smash SaaS systems to see where you've used similar cadences in your passwords. And that's why, again, it's important to talk to the guys about two-factor authentication and also healthy password cadence to make sure you're covered there. So we've talked about malware and hackers and protection in the cloud. And a lot of this, what we've been talking about is about financial gain. But I just want to give you the last example here as a bit of fun of something where you know, the people use attacks for three things. It's either sabotage, espionage, or theft, right? So I want to give you an idea of how they use it to attack or to affect people in other ways. And this is all around phishing. So I don't know if any of you guys know who this gentleman is, but this gentleman used to, and I'll use the word used to, work in the emergency notification area in Hawaii. And we know he does that because he's got a Hawaiian shirt on. That's a work shirt for that guy because he works in Hawaii. And I don't know if you guys remember, but about 3 years ago, a text alert went out to the whole state of Hawaii saying that a nuclear missile was inbound and they're all going to die. Okay? Now, this gentleman here worked in that department that sent that text out. And this is a photo from his social media account a couple of days before that incident. And, it's just him at work and he's got his clocks and he's very important. So at 8 a.m. in the morning or 9 a.m. in the morning, 1 January morning, this alert went out to the whole island of Hawaii. And it says, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter, this is not a drill. Now I know this because that is a screenshot of my phone and I was in Hawaii when that happened. And I was sat on the toilet when this message came through, and I can assure you that is definitely the place you want to be sat when that message pops up on your phone. Now everyone's phone, like in the hotel, went off. I go down to the lobby, it's carnage. Americans aren't very good in a panic. Australians are a lot better. It took 40 minutes before they sent through a secondary message to say, oh, sorry, that was a mistake. It was quite an interesting 40 minutes. But back to this gentleman here. Now, the government's never said what happened there. But if you can have a look on this picture here, you might see an example as to what went on. Because what was put up here, and if anyone can actually spot, he's got a name tag here, and a few guys might have spotted that and gone, well, that's probably not ideal to be putting on social media. But there's a bigger problem. So he's got his username and password on his screen. And this is an example of how people can use our own data against us. And so in this case, someone's got in there and decided they thought it would be a pretty good prank. It might have been Aston Kutcher to just terrify the whole of Hawaii. But in your businesses, they can be building profiles about you to try and trick your staff into doing stuff. So again, if you're on LinkedIn or Facebook saying you're about to go on holiday and they're looking at your CFO, they'll use that to try and against you in events. And so it's important to talk to staff about and have policies and procedures about what's reasonable social media usage, what information you want to put up, and how should they use work information and work systems. So with that, Jordan's going to come in. We're going to talk a little bit about how we actually protect ourselves from a preventative standpoint, as well as having these backups in place as well.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks for that. Really some great insights there. So from our perspective, from a best practices perspective, we believe there's 3 pillars to best practice, and that is people, process, and technology. And we say this because you can have the best technology that's available. You can have great processes and awesome people. But if one of those falls down, we're definitely exposed. And some examples of those that I'd love to share with you would be roughly just over 12 months ago. I was at a conference with Milan and we were talking to another IT provider. And we started talking about an incident where there'd been a ransomware attack on a real estate agency in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. And what happened was the receptionist received an email and she clicked on it, believing she was doing the right thing. And that email happened to be a phishing attack. Now, what happened was they operated on a server system and their entire servers were encrypted and they lost access to all of their data. So what did they do? They called their IT company and said, hey, this has happened. Can we get access to the backups? After a bit of back and forth, they realized they didn't actually have backups that had been tested and worked. So that meant all of their data was gone. So they had tenants, they had all these various information in there that was gone. So they had to basically hire 2 to 3 staff for a period of 3 months to re-enter all that data. Now, what was, they lost the ability to reconcile their trust accounts. They lost all of the details of who the tenants were, who the landlords were. They had people calling saying, where's our rent payments? We haven't been paid. And it's funny because we had heard from a landlord that uses this agency that something had happened, but we weren't really clear what had actually happened. So it was interesting to see and hear the back end of this some months later. But the part that makes it even worse was that not only did they have the cost of having staff having to be brought on to enter the data, they had, the reputational damage was significant. But what the hackers did was they emailed out to all of the tenants and said, hey, just letting you know that we've updated our banking details. So all of the tenants then responded and said, no problem, and started to pay their rent into a new bank account. So as the data was being paid in or updated, the agency would start calling these tenants and say, you're actually behind on your rent. Can you, you need to make a few payments. And very quickly they realized what had happened. So they had a significant expense for additional staff. The reputational risk was massive. And then there was the financial loss that they would have incurred. And from a process, and we've got a lot of stories that we can talk about from a people perspective. There was another one, Pete, you touched on. Often people will have the same passwords for their email as they will for their Bunnings loyalty card. There was a scenario where there was the managing director of another real estate-based business had received an email from Dropbox, and he entered in his details. He was expecting, to be able to access some information on Dropbox, logged into Dropbox, and there was nothing there and didn't think much of it. About 2 weeks later, there was an email that was sent from his email account through to the finance team saying, we need this invoice paid. It's $22,000 worth. And what happened there was they responded back saying, are you sure it's a large amount? He responded back saying, absolutely, get it done. Now, he didn't send those emails. It was the hacker that did that. And for 2 weeks, they just looked at his language that he would use on emails, the way that he would communicate, and they knew that he had a meeting because they had access to his calendar and that he wouldn't be looking at his phone. So they emailed during that meeting and had this approved, and the funds were sent out. So that's a bit of an example of the process piece that's fallen down, where there wasn't a process in place at all to validate payments that needed to go out. Another example where we had a client where we spent 2 days of cybersecurity training and awareness training, and then the business invested a lot of time in developing their own processes. So they'd flown staff down from New South Wales and Queensland and brought staff in from regional Victoria. And about a week later, there was an invoice that came into their chief finance officer for just over $200,000. So for a payment of that amount, the process they came up with was it needs to be signed off by another person again, just to validate the details. So they sent it through for that validation, and they had purchased from this organization. They were expecting to get an invoice for that amount, so they paid it out. Now, about a few days later, there was a second invoice they were again expecting, and again sent it to the other person to validate. Now, this time what the person did was they actually looked at what were the bank details on that invoice versus what was in the system, and they quickly realized they were different. So really concerned, they went back and looked at the last invoice and again realized that the details on the invoice didn't match what they had on file. So the process that wasn't followed was they didn't go all the way. They did part of it, but they didn't actually validate the data. So they'd paid out just over $200,000. So again, the process, was there, but it wasn't followed. So again, a bit of a combination of both people and process. Hopefully, or thankfully, they did have cyber insurance, and we haven't confirmed what the outcome was, but we're fairly confident they were able to recoup that through that insurance they had in place. And the third that really ties it all in together is technology. And, there's lots of things that you can do. You can look at some simple wins of things such as multi-factor authentication, your password managers, your firewalls, and making sure that you do have a continuity solution in place, like we've spoken about a lot today. And the other really important thing, and we'll throw to Milan in a moment, but it's easy to hear some of these risks and challenges that we're all seeing and automatically go out and look for a new solution. But you need to have a strategy behind it, because we see a lot of organizations will have different bolt-ons that they add in without understanding what is the business looking to achieve, and is that going to be the best solution for them. So technology is important, but it's also having that strategy behind it as well. and then if we look at what do we do as an organization to help our clients, and we're rolling this out more progressively as we grow our team, which has been excellent, is the way that we educate staff or our client staff. So we do that through a range of different ways. So there'll be people on this call that have probably received the fake phishing email from us. And so we'll create various emails, whether it be an eBay, an Australia Post, or whatever it might be, and send those out. And then we do that so that then we can report back and let you know what's happened, but at the same time, provide training to the staff. So you might click on an email and it'll say you've been phished, and then there's a quick little short video to explain what you could have looked at just to protect yourself. Password education. I know John, one of our account managers, is not on the call today, ran a session with an accounting firm that we take care of, and went through a lot of this information with them. And that's a really big thing that we're focusing on at the moment, that password education. And then training and compliance courses, whether it's something similar to this. Ideally, we like to get in front of you wherever we can and do it face to face, but we've been running more over the web, and that security awareness training. So what we will do is put the teams through a series of training courses, whether that be monthly, quarterly, whatever you would prefer, and make sure that that awareness is at the level it needs to be. And we find that's really important. So you can have, those three pillars are critical, and the people part of it, it's the awareness that's the most critical for them, because you're always going to get attacked. There's a slide that we don't have on today, but after we announced our recent merger, there was a number of attacks that I started getting. My name was on some of the press releases that went out, and all of a sudden I had emails coming from supposedly Milan asking me to buy things or do certain things. And if you're not aware, it's really easy to get caught up in it. So awareness is a critical piece. Perhaps Milan, as we head into the Q&A piece, could you give us some examples of where we've seen perhaps the strategy or the IT strategy not really aligning with what the business is actually wanting to do, or they haven't actually reviewed or come up with their strategy?
Yeah, I think that the most recent example is with everyone rushing to work from home. I think everyone in this rush to be able to work from home and work remotely, everyone has basically gone for what the easiest option is to get people to work from home, and not really considering what their security exposure is. A lot of people have just jumped to using all these different cloud-based applications, don't know where they're hosted, don't know who's got access to it. It's been a really interesting situation where people have been in a rush to deal with something but haven't thought any part of it through. And we're seeing a lot more of this now. With people moving to the cloud, it's one of those areas where people are not really considering all the ramifications of going to the cloud.
And it's important, Milan, as the trusted advisor, is, because the first instant is, look, I need to get it up. I need to get my staff working, right? But as a trusted advisor, you've got to say, listen, we need to make sure this is secure, or you're going to be down for a whole heap longer. Because as I said earlier about the bad guys being great marketers, they're just seeing COVID as a campaign, right? So we're seeing millions of bad actors all focused around COVID as the payload, because the story about the Trojan horse, right? That very first Trojan horse, right, in Troy, that worked because those guys had been at war for like 10 years and they were tired, and they dropped their guard and they rolled in a horse without a pile of soldiers in. And that's still happening now, right? We're more likely to make a mistake when we're stressed or uncomfortable or out of our comfort zone. And COVID's done that to all of us. And the bad guys are having a field day in presenting it as a COVID style attack.
Yeah, I think another example might be where, and it's not necessarily a security perspective, but as all these teams started being dispersed, there was a big mad rush to get different platforms that would help with collaboration and a range of other things. And, pretty much 99% of our clients are on the 365 suite. And there's a significant amount of tools and resources within that you can utilize, which you can still maintain those security permissions and the backup and so forth. So it's also, the security piece is really important in the strategy, but it's also everything else as well from a productivity perspective. Making sure that strategy is aligned as well.
Correct. Yeah.
I'd love to hear from perhaps any questions that we might have from anyone that's joined us on today's call as well.
Jordan, I have a question. It's Tammy from Yuri Ambiac. We have, so we've gone to the 365 environment and moved across to SharePoint. So potentially staff can log in from home on their own computers, still got the two-factor authenticator, but is there any risk with staff utilising their own computers opposed to our own supplied computers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically with that, we find that if we're not managing the end user desktop, we actually don't know what's on there. And a lot of people, when they're using their personal computer, you don't know what their kids are doing on their computer. They could have gone onto a website, downloaded a game, thought, oh yeah, this is a free game, let's download it, amazing, let's play this game. Who knows what's actually in there? There could be a malicious payload that's now recording passwords and keylogging every action that they're actually taking on their personal computer. We find that access to a corporate network needs to be from a corporate managed device in most cases. And if that's not possible, then we need to really consider other things like a remote desktop environment or a VDI type environment where, I'm getting a bit technical now, but basically when we can actually ensure that there is a level of security around how the access to the data is being maintained. And adding to that,
the second part of that as well is obviously compliance or procedures and policies,
yeah.
right? So, do you have a rules on what people can do in a work time on a work computer or when they're accessing it from personal, so around Facebook usage and all that type of thing. And then having that reassurance of a secure, untouchable backup. So if someone does come in because it's preventative and starts deleting that, you are easily able to recover that and it doesn't affect the overall business.
Yeah, I think you can get, it's one of those questions where you can get really technical with it, but the easiest answer to this question is, do we trust a computer that we don't have eyes on? Probably not.
And would that go the same for phones?
Yeah, phones is another one of those fun topics. So with phones, we recommend doing some level of mobile device management to some degree, so we can control how that phone's being used.
I think the other thing there as well, Milan, is that if somebody's using their personal phone, we've seen this a lot, like we've seen it a significant amount, businesses that traditionally wouldn't offer a work mobile phone to somebody because there wasn't a need for it, all of a sudden staff are using their personal phones. And what we've seen happen is that one, there's the security perspective, but two, where staff are using their personal phones now, there's a couple of other risks that creep in. One is just a work-life balance perspective and a wellness perspective where clients or whoever it might be have always got that personal phone and can always call them at any time of the night, but also who knows what they might want to call for. And the other piece is, for certain businesses, is a risk of, you don't want people to have a personal number, because if they were to leave and go to another organization, there's the potential for them to take clients as well. So there are a couple of risks there that we have definitely been seeing a lot of concerns raised around. So again, it's that there's the security, there's the wellness piece, and just the overall, the risk of data theft or losing clients as well.
I think it also depends on the type of data that you have people gaining access to. Like Microsoft has released a service basically called Mobile Data Security. What does that mean? It means that if someone was to download a SharePoint document on their personal computer and then the next day you've terminated them, or they've been exited from the business, or they've been cut access to a certain file now, that person still has access to it. But if you're using this Microsoft product, what happens is that file is now encrypted at rest and they can't actually open that file because they don't have an active user account. Same applies for your mobile devices. They've released tools where we can basically isolate your mailbox so it's got no access to any other part of the phone. I know that we turned it on in our office, and I know that when we turned it on, a lot of people got really upset that they couldn't copy and paste into their emails anymore. Jordan being one of them. But like, we have to maintain data security because you don't know what's going to get passed through by email or from the work services that are provided to that individual.
Yeah.
Could be
We've got
anything. Could be like
Yeah.
personally identifiable information that you don't want to get out.
Absolutely. We've got a question from Walid. Hi guys, what should we do if we click on a spam link? That's a really good question. And it really depends on how far you've gone, but often we'll see that some people might click on it and then realize it's a spam or a phishing email. Sometimes they might not. But Milan, what happens if you were to click on a link or a document? Is there the ability that potentially something could happen even if you haven't submitted data?
Yep. So there are, if your computers aren't up to date, if they're not actively being patched with all the security releases from Microsoft, there are past events where images, just like a JPEG, can have an embedded payload in them. So you could potentially click on a link, opens up this cool picture of a beach, and then all of a sudden you've now got malware on your computer. So what we recommend is immediately call your IT department that you're using, tell them what's going on, and we recommend to turn that computer off straight away to make sure that nothing happens from that computer onwards within the network.
And then generally would get one of our technicians to look at it and see exactly what's happened. So,
Yep.
but really good question. And the most important thing is, if you think it could be a spam email, raise it straight away. Don't wait because, you know, who knows what could happen.
Yeah, I think there's another question in there. Which malware software do we recommend? That's a hard question to answer because there's no 100% software solution for today's threats. We have multiple different platforms that we use within our company that we end up installing and managing and monitoring. But we find now that we're moving towards an era of a ongoing monitoring and remediation of security incidents in real time. So if something is detected on a client computer, we actually get flagged with it immediately, and we try to act on that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So,
and if you're using Norton or McAfee or something like that, I'd definitely have a chat to us or somebody else about getting a better product. So, but and just reviewing it.
yep.
Do you conduct periodic audit of your customers to check their security is up to date and follow best practices? Yeah, so really good question, Mivan. So it's one of the great things about off the back of our merger, we've been able to review the structures of the team and created the professional or proactive services team. So periodically now, on a monthly basis, we will have a technician that's dedicated to doing those health checks and seeing what are the issues that we're identifying and being proactive in the way that we overcome those and rectify them. So absolutely. Richard, cyber insurance with the right security is a must. Absolutely. And Richard's a great insurance broker who does a lot in the cyber space. So we're actually looking to have another call similar to this, but we'll be just focusing on how can cyber insurance help you? What are some of the benefits of it, and just really understanding that, because we feel that, and what we see is that there's still not a great understanding of what it can actually do to protect you. So we'll make sure to let everybody know when we hold that next event. Do we have any other questions, or what are the smartest / worst cybersecurity breaches you've seen in the industry?
I got to go on for you.
Go for it.
There was a large accounting firm in the US, multiple floors, and a young intern walks into the lady's bathroom and she sees a USB key on the floor, and on it says staff salaries. So can anyone guess what this young lady did with this USB key that says all the staff salaries? Jordan, what do you reckon she did?
I'd say she probably picked it up and wanted to have a look.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But this young lady had been on cybersecurity training and she thought that was a bit weird. She brought it into the IT department and gave it to a young network administrator. And he immediately plugged it into the computers because he was nosy, right? And sometimes the worst of us, it's like the old, you know, the painter's got the worst house, painted house. So he plugged that in and brought down the entire network. And again, it's an example of the easiest ways the bad guys attack us is not writing super code, you know, like in the Hugh Jackman movie where it's all going down the screen. It's just getting us to do something silly, right? To trick us into doing something. And, you know, we talk about be it a physical attack like that, or it could be someone just sitting up the back of a car going into a secure area and just kind of ghosting in. That's where a lot of these attacks come from. That's where Kevin Mitnick says most of his initial entries into a network come from someone allowing him into that. And that's where that staff training component is so important.
Yeah, and so I've posted the YouTube link to that demonstration, which is on our YouTube page in the chat comments. Another interesting attack was just the other day. It was a hedge fund which occurred. It was an Aussie hedge fund based in Sydney, I believe, and they received a Zoom invite, and which was a fake Zoom invite, I should say. And they were hit with $8 million, I believe, and they didn't end well. So I'll post a link into the comments. So that's another big one to look at. And from a dark web perspective, in Q1 of this year, it's been reported that there was 267 million Facebook users' details and usernames and passwords and data were sold on the dark web. And do you want to have a guess at how much that cost to buy? Pete, what would you guess, or anybody else? What would you say? 267 million Facebook users details.
Jeez, I would even terrified to guess on that. I don't know if it's going to be a ridiculous amount or ridiculous. I got a feeling it's going to be a small amount.
So it was $540 US.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's a lot of data. So what we will do is we will send out, off the back of this, we'll send out some dark web reports to you. We'll do a check on the domain name and see. There's some of the attendees already have the monitoring on, but we'll send out a report that shows if you have any compromised data on the dark web. That's one of the things that we do. We scan through the dark web and identify if there's any hits there, and then we ensure that your passwords get changed pretty quickly. So we'll get that sent out post-event as well.
And, you know, there's been a fair bit of doom and gloom in this call, and we don't want everyone depressed on their Thursday. And what I say to a lot of customers is, you know, it's really hard to keep abreast of what's going on, right? Of what the compliance is, what the risks are, you know, all these new bad actors you're hearing about today. But the easiest thing that I recommend to end customers do is just find themselves a trusted advisor. So like you go to your accountant for financial advice that should save you money. You go to a lawyer to get you out of problems. You know, go to your IT specialist to get their advice on how to be more productive and how to save money and be better at your business. But secondly, how to protect your business and protect that critical data. And certainly Milan, Jordan and the team are one of the best in the industry, and certainly some of the best in Victoria. And I would highly recommend listen to the guys with the advice that they give.
Thanks, Pete. Do we have any other questions?
Great session. Thank you.
No? Thanks, Anthony. So there should have been some packs that have been sent out. If you haven't received it, the couriers have been living up to the reputation, a little bit slow over the last couple of days, but they will hopefully have arrived. But yeah, thank you to everyone for taking the time. We're really conscious of just how busy it is at the moment, not just in terms of, you know, just there's so much happening. So we really do appreciate it, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.